The vortex of colors and sounds overwhelmed Nanda's senses. Strange, transparent humanoid figures surrounded her, whispering secrets that chilled her to the bone. The unseen forces tugged at her very soul, threatening to tear her apart as she tumbled through the chaotic abyss. Icy winds whipped at her fur, followed by the scorching heat of flames, and the disconcerting sensation of falling through endless space. The vortex seemed to hold the memories of 1,000 lifetimes, swirling around her in a dizzying spectacle of light and sound, a maelstrom of past, present, and future threatening to shatter her mind. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the chaos stopped. She landed with a soft thud on solid, wet ground, the impact jarring but not painful. For a moment, she lay stunned, the echoes of the vortex still ringing in her ears. Nanda blinked rapidly, trying to clear the disorientation that clung to her like bubblegum on the back of a skirt. A faint smell of rain was discernible in the air, and she noticed a hole in the roof where water was coming in directly above her head. "Trust me to land here." Her eyes, still adjusting to the dim light, discerned the flicker of torches mounted along the damp walls, their flames casting long, erratic shadows that danced like restless specters. As was her habit, she began to name the shadows, weaving an impromptu puppet tale in her mind. "There's Sir Wiggleton and Lady Swish," she whispered to herself, the faint smile on her lips a fragile anchor to reality. The stories helped, they always did. They kept her grounded amidst the unknown. The corridor stretched on interminably, narrowing as it vanished into darkness in either direction. Its walls glistened with condensation, cold droplets catching the torchlight as they slid down the slick stone. Strange carvings adorned the walls, intricate, sinuous patterns that seemed to writhe and undulate under her gaze, as if alive and mocking her attempts to decipher them. Faces emerged from the stone, their hollow eyes staring blindly ahead, mouths frozen in silent screams or twisted in grotesque warnings. They seemed to leer at her, shifting imperceptibly with every flicker of the torches. She couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were watching her, and the faint whisper of unseen currents tickling her ears only deepened her unease. "9 lives won't be enough for this place," she muttered, her voice swallowed by the uneasy silence. As she padded cautiously forward, she couldn't shake the sensation that the walls were pressing closer, the corridor shrinking around her like a constricting serpent. Her sharp ears caught the faint echo of her own footsteps, a rhythm that felt strangely out of sync with her movements, as if the very passage of time were distorted in this place. The carvings on the walls grew more elaborate, depicting scenes of knights locked in deadly combat with serpentine beasts, their armor gleaming and their swords flashing in the flickering torchlight. Robed figures with obscured faces performed arcane rituals, their hands raised in supplication or casting spells of unknown power. And most disturbingly, she saw a feline figure much like herself, standing before a swirling portal that mirrored the one she had just emerged from. Her tail lashed nervously. Was this a warning? Or a message meant for her? After what felt like an eternity, the corridor abruptly opened into a vast chamber that took her breath away. Towering bookshelves, laden with ancient tomes bound in leather and iron, stretched from the floor to a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. The air carried the dry, papery scent of aged parchment and ink, mingled with a strange, almost electric charge, like lightning frozen in time. Moonlight streamed through a solitary window high above, casting silvery beams onto a massive wooden table in the center of the room. The table was covered in a chaotic array of scrolls, maps, and strange instruments of unknown purpose. And there, hunched over a book larger than most house cats, sat an elderly man with a shock of unruly gray hair and a long, white beard that reached his chest. He wore a simple brown robe, its edges frayed with age, and his brow was furrowed in concentration as he traced the lines of an enormous tome with a gnarled finger. Around him were scattered scrolls covered in cryptic symbols, strange glass vials filled with liquids that glowed faintly, and instruments that seemed designed for purposes beyond comprehension. Nanda approached cautiously, her curiosity piqued by the man's intense focus and the strange objects surrounding him. "Excuse me," she ventured tentatively, her voice echoing softly in the cavernous chamber. The man's head snapped up, his sunken eyes widening with surprise as he took in the sight of a cat addressing him. "By the heavens," he rasped, his voice hoarse with disuse. "A talking cat. Am I dreaming?" "I could ask you the same question," Nanda retorted, her tail twitching with amusement. This whole place feels like a dream. By the way, her eyes narrowed as recognition dawned. I know that voice. Aren't you the guy who was giving me and Lancelot trouble earlier? The man blinked, his expression shifting from surprise to something more guarded. Ah, I see. So you've encountered my other self. He sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. Then I owe you an explanation, though I doubt you'll find it satisfying. Other self? Nanda echoed, her fur bristling slightly. That booming voice, the shadows, the threats. That was you? In a manner of speaking, he admitted, his gaze dropping to the tome before him. The alchemist was, me. Or rather, a fragment of who I once was, left behind to guard the sanctuary and its secrets. When I relinquished my mortal ties to wield the power of the sanctuary, the magic fractured my soul. What you encountered was the remnant of that power, a shadow of my former self, corrupted by the same forces I sought to control. Nanda's ears flattened. You mean to tell me that booming, cryptic, shadowy version of you was some kind of magical echo? He nodded solemnly. Precisely. It was bound to the sanctuary, programmed, if you will, to test the worth of those who sought its power. But as the years passed, it became more volatile, more aggressive. I fear it no longer reflected the person I am, or was. Convenient, Nanda muttered, circling him warily. So, are you going to give me a reason to trust you now? Or should I brace myself for more shadow monsters? Jimmy G, if that was truly his name, met her gaze with a weary smile. Trust is not something I expect from you, nor do I deserve it. But know this, my intentions have always been to protect this realm from the power that destroyed me. If you and your knight friend are caught in this web, then you have my sincerest apologies. Nanda studied him carefully, her tail flicking in thought. So what happens now? You're obviously not the menacing voice booming from the dagger anymore. But you're also not exactly just some friendly old scholar reading books in a spooky library. Jimmy G leaned back in his chair, a glint of something ancient and knowing in his eyes. What happens now, little cat, is entirely up to you. You've crossed paths with forces far older and darker than anything Lancelot or I could ever prepare for. If you're to survive this, you'll need answers. And those, he gestured to the shelves of books surrounding them, are why I'm still here. And where exactly is here? Nanda asked, looking around. The man blinked, his expression shifting from surprise to curiosity. This, he said, his voice regaining some of its strength, is the library of the Labyrinth. A repository of forgotten knowledge, a place where the boundaries of time and space become blurred. He paused, studying her with a newfound intensity. And you are? Nanda, she replied, her tail twitching with a hint of weariness. And considering where I've been lately, I have a feeling this adventure is about to get a whole lot stranger. He chuckled, a dry, crackling sound that echoed through the chamber. Indeed, he said, his eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. The labyrinth has a way of exceeding expectations. He gestured towards a chair piled high with scrolls. Please, join me. My name is Jimmy G, and I suspect we have much to discuss. Nanda hesitated, her instincts warning her to be cautious. But there was something about the old man, a warmth in his eyes and a gentle curiosity in his demeanor, that eased her apprehension. She leaped gracefully onto the table, her claws clicking softly against the wood, and settled herself amongst the scattered scrolls. Jimmy G, she purred, her green eyes fixed on his. It's a pleasure to meet you. Jimmy G smiled, his wrinkles deepening like a roadmap of a life well lived. The pleasure is all mine, Nanda, he replied. Now, tell me, how did a remarkable creature like you find your way into this forgotten corner of existence? Nanda recounted her recent adventures, starting with the strange dream that had pulled her from her peaceful slumber, the encounter with the cloaked figure and the wolf-like dog, the confrontation with the knights, and the terrifying journey through the vortex. Jimmy G listened intently, his expression shifting between fascination and concern, as she described the events that had led her to the labyrinth. It seems you've stumbled into a most peculiar predicament, he said when she had finished, stroking his beard thoughtfully. The labyrinth is a place of great power and danger, a nexus of forgotten knowledge and hidden pathways. It draws those who seek answers, those who yearn for something beyond the ordinary. He paused, his gaze drifting towards the towering bookshelves. But the labyrinth is also a jealous guardian of its secrets. It tests those who dare to enter its domain, challenging their courage, their wisdom, and their very sanity. Nanda's ears twitched. "You speak as if you've experienced these challenges yourself," she observed, her voice laced with curiosity. Jimmy G nodded, a shadow passing over his face. "Indeed," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I came to the labyrinth seeking answers, hoping to unlock the secrets of time and reality. But the labyrinth is a maze with no easy exits. I've been trapped here for many years, unable to find my way back to the world I once knew." He looked at Nanda, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "Perhaps you, Nanda, with your unique abilities and your unwavering spirit, can succeed where I have failed. Perhaps you can find the answers we both seek and escape the labyrinth's clutches." Before Nanda could respond, the air in the chamber grew heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. A low hum began to resonate, vibrating through her pause and into her very core. The torchlight flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls like frenzied spirits. The books on the shelves seemed to rustle and whisper, their pages turning as if stirred by an unseen wind. "What's happening?" she asked, more to herself, her fur bristling with apprehension. Jimmy G shot to his feet, his face pale with alarm. "Someone, or something, has entered the labyrinth. This is no place for uninvited guests." Nanda narrowed her eyes. "Uninvited? Pretty sure I didn't RSVP either." "Then you're luckier than most," Jimmy G muttered, reaching for a gnarled staff leaning against the table. The staff, carved from some dark, unknown wood, pulsed with a faint inner light. "Come. If we stay here, we'll be easy prey." "Prey for what?" she asked, though she followed him nonetheless, her instincts screaming at her to flee this unsettling place. Jimmy G hesitated, his expression grim. "For the keepers of the labyrinth. They are ancient beings, bound to this place, who ensure that the knowledge here remains protected, at any cost." Nanda's eyes flicked to the endless shelves around them, her mind reeling with the implications. She understood now. Jimmy G had not come here simply out of curiosity or ambition. He was chasing something far more dangerous. Answers that could warp time, reality, even his very existence. The labyrinth, with its shifting walls and hidden dangers, had drawn him in because he had sought too much. Secrets beyond the veil of ordinary understanding. The price for such knowledge was steep, and Jimmy G had already paid dearly. He was trapped here, caught between the hunger for deeper truths and the labyrinth's unyielding grip. The alchemist had come looking for answers. Answers that might explain the very nature of time and reality. That might grant him power over life and death. But in doing so, he had locked himself in the labyrinth's maze, surrounded by its deadly guardians. As they navigated deeper into the labyrinth, the corridors seemed to shift and twist around them, defying all sense of logic and direction. Doorways appeared and vanished before their eyes. Walls stretched and contracted like living things, and the carvings now depicted eerie, faceless figures looming over the scenes, their presence radiating an aura of menace. Nanda stayed close to Jimmy G, her sharp eyes scanning for any flicker of movement in the dim light. A sudden growl echoed from somewhere behind them, low and guttural, sending a shiver down her spine. Nanda froze, her ears swiveling, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. For one fleeting moment, her thoughts leapt to Viego. Could he have found them in this twisted place? But no, this growl was deeper, rougher, and carried an edge of hostility that didn't belong to her protector. Although some protector, she thought bitterly. Where even is that pesky pooch? I haven't seen or sensed him in what feels like hours. Her tail flicked in irritation, but the growl came again, closer this time, and the frustration was quickly replaced by another spine-chilling feeling. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her heart. "Keep moving," Jimmy G urged, his voice tense and urgent. "Don't look back." Nanda glanced over her shoulder despite his warning, her curiosity overwhelming her fear. A shadow moved at the edge of her vision, too large and too fast to be human, or anything natural. It slithered along the wall, its form shifting and distorting, its presence exuding an aura of ancient evil. "I said, don't look back," Jimmy G snapped, gripping her scruff and pulling her forward, just as a massive clawed hand, tipped with obsidian talons, swiped through the space they'd occupied a moment before. Nanda gave a loud hiss at the air, her heart racing. The air crackled with energy, and the stench of decay intensified, filling her nostrils with the sickening sweetness of death. What was that? She gasped, her breath catching in her throat. A sentinel, Jimmy G panted, his grip firm as they ran, his breath coming in ragged gasps. They guard the library against intruders, creatures of darkness bound to this place. If they catch us, they'll shred us like old parchment. Got it, Nanda interrupted, her claws scraping against the floor for traction as they fled through the twisting corridors. They burst into another chamber, this one smaller and filled with an ethereal light. Glowing orbs of various sizes and colors hung suspended in midair, their light pulsing in rhythmic patterns that were both mesmerizing and unsettling. The air thrummed with energy, and Nanda felt a strange tingling sensation as she stepped into the chamber. Here, Jimmy G said, yanking a small pulsating orb from the air and handing it to Nanda. The orb radiated warmth and hummed with a low, resonant frequency. Take this. It'll guide you out of the labyrinth. Nanda looked at the orb skeptically. And what about you? I have my own path to follow, he replied, his tone unreadable. He turned away, his gaze fixed on the shimmering orbs, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. Before she could argue, the growling returned, louder and closer this time, echoing through the corridors like a death knell. Jimmy G shoved her toward a shimmering archway that had suddenly appeared against the far wall, its edges rippling like water. Go! He shouted, his voice filled with urgency. Don't worry about me, I'll find my own way out. Nanda hesitated for a fraction of a second, her instincts warring with her concern for the old alchemist. But the growling grew louder, and she knew there was no time to argue. She darted through the archway, clutching the glowing orb in her jaws, its warmth a comforting presence in the chilling labyrinth. The last thing she saw before the portal closed behind her was Jimmy G standing defiantly, his staff glowing with a fierce energy as the sentinel emerged from the shadows, its claws outstretched and its eyes burning with malevolent intent. Then the archway vanished, leaving her alone. The transition was seamless. One moment, she was in the labyrinth, surrounded by ancient magic and lurking dangers. The next, she was in another corridor, the orb dimming in her jaws. Even the faintest sound, a creak of ancient wood or a distant murmur, felt amplified, stirring the still air, but she was alive, for now.